This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carolyn Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
All right, we keep saying it over and over again. We get a 24-hour news cycle with a lot of news out of China, and I feel like I've been saying that for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And our Balance of Power newsletter coming out today noting all roads no longer lead to Rome, they lead to Beijing. And this as U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo was wrapping up her trip to China. You had the UK Foreign Secretary also arriving. That's the most senior British diplomatic visitor in 5 years. Russian President Vladimir Putin's likely to visit as well in October.
That's a big one.
Yeah, to meet up with President Xi. And so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, we're really glad to have back with us for some analysis, for insight on the situation, also for the market and business outlook of China. We've got Andy Browne with us. He's the former editorial director at Bloomberg New Economy, and he spent 3 decades in Asia as both China editor and a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Today, Carol, Andy leads the China Hub as a partner at Brunswick Group. It's a critical issues advisory firm. He joins us on Zoom from New York City.
Andy, so good to have you back with us. We've been dying to talk to you because you really always give us some clarity on everything that's going on. So as our Balance of Power newsletter said, all roads no longer lead to Rome, they lead to Beijing. Are they right?
Well, first of all, it's great to be back on the show, Carol, Tim. It's always terrific to be with you. All roads lead to Beijing. Certainly, Gina Raimondo's road led to Beijing. And by all accounts, a very successful visit. The Chinese take Gina Raimondo very seriously. They trust her. They seem to have a good relationship with her. They find her pragmatic, relatively non-ideological. And this is really quite remarkable, given that Gina Raimondo is at the sharp end of U.S. economic engagement with China, right? She's the one that presides over this proliferating regime of sanctions and export controls and tariffs, which, of course, this administration inherited from the last one. And the Chinese find this deeply threatening. Nonetheless, she had a pretty good visit. And her main message was, no, we're not here to kill you. We don't want to put you out of business. This is not decoupling. This is de-risking, and that's a very different thing.
Well, what did you make of her comment that she argued that China is driving away American companies by making investments in the world's second biggest economy increasingly hazardous? She said that, okay, here's the quote, Andy. I know you know it. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Increasingly, I hear from businesses, China is uninvestable because it's become too risky. This is what Gina Raimondo told reporters Tuesday when she was aboard a high-speed train from Beijing to Shanghai. What do you make of that comment?
Investment flows have been flowing out from foreign investors.
Well, she said the right thing, and that's what they need to hear. Because quite often in China, the CEOs of the companies that are investing there don't dare speak that kind of truth to power. And so, it takes a Gina Raimondo to go over there and say, look, we have a problem. And businesses certainly do have a problem now in China. But it's still, I think it's significant, though, the second part of your commentary. She went on a high-speed train.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, right? That's kind of a common touch. She hopped a train to go down to Shanghai. The Chinese would have liked that. They showcased their, really unbelievably efficient 200-mile-an-hour, 4.5 hours from Beijing.
That sounds nice,
to Shanghai, which is like unbelievable.
We don't have that here in the U.S.
What is it about her that resonates so well with Chinese officials?
Well, I think they feel that they can talk to her and they're going to get a straight answer. And that really was, and she also, she's constructive, right? So I thought actually she handled it in a really smart way. She said, look, let's start with confidence building measures. So one of the things that she's agreed on is that the United States and China are going to promote travel, right? Tourism. So who can disagree that it would be a good thing if more Americans went to China and more Chinese people came to the United States, right? It builds trust, builds understanding, people-to-people relations. These countries have been separated now for 3 years under lockdown. very few flights now. I was in Beijing a couple months ago. I was actually staying in Four Seasons Hotel. I was the only foreigner in the whole hotel, right? I mean, the airport is half empty. We need more interaction, and it's just a great place, a smart place to start.
Well, Andy, talk more about that and give us some anecdotes from your recent trip there, because you've spent so much time in the country. I know this is post-pandemic. You went there kind of during the pandemic too. When you were helping with the Olympics for NBC,
right?
But just give us the differences that you see now based on your recent trip.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to go. I mean, you have to go there to feel this. The sense you get by talking to people on the street, my friends, people in the business community. People are kind of in shock, I mean, I understand this. Consumer confidence has really been shattered. I mean, people, I think, feel really kind of discombobulated, disoriented. I mean, what just happened? We went through a 3-year lockdown. And it was quite painful. I mean, you talk to people in Shanghai, they're suffering from something like post-traumatic stress disorder, right? These are upper middle class families that didn't know if they were going to spend that night in bed in their own homes, or be carted away to some isolation center, or if their kids would be taken from them, or if guys in white hazmat suits were going to burst through the front door, and drag them out, or put a lock on the outside of the door. They didn't know sometimes if they could even feed their families, right? And they've been so used to a government that looks after all this, that is focused on growth, focused on development, and it just seems like they're lurching from one blunder to another, and the business confidence obviously has yet to recover, and the confidence of foreign investors, and that's what Gina Raimondo was speaking to. People got so used to the idea that Chinese supply chains were secure, right? You could put them all in China. That's what Apple did, the whole lot. And look what Apple's doing now. It's starting at the margins, pulling it out, putting it in places like Vietnam, India. It's all about now de-risking.
Back to Andy Browne we go. As we said earlier, he leads the China hub. He's a partner over at Brunswick Group. He's still with us on Zoom in New York City. And we were talking about this in the break.
Yeah, my question, Andy, is if China is doing so poorly in its attempted recovery from 3 years of lockdowns, if the consumer is so weak, if there are concerns about shadow banks crumbling and not paying people back, do American companies really want to invest in China?
Tim, I think it's so important to put this into perspective. China is not collapsing, okay? China is suffering from what some people call the 4Ds. You've got a demographic crisis, you have a debt crisis, you have a decoupling problem, you have a deflation problem. The headlines look terrible. And it is extraordinary. The Chinese economy is barely growing right now. And the U.S. economy is steaming ahead. I think it's growing, 6%? A complete role reversal, right? But China is the world's second largest economy, and it's going to be the second or third largest economy for decades to come, right? It's not going away. I think what we can expect, big picture, starting now, a period of slow relative decline. Businesses still must be in China, right? They can't ignore China. And particularly the businesses that are reliant on China for future growth, luxury, chemicals, auto, and so on. In those industries, they're pouring investment in. They have to. I mean, you can't be half-hearted in China. You got to be all in because the competition there is really good. So if you're there and you're dependent on growth, you have to invest to keep up with the market. You have to invest in technology so that you're able to compete. And in fact, some of these companies have an aggressive strategy of investment. It's called in China for China, right? So they're buying local companies, they're investing in technology. If you don't have to be in China right now, you don't want to be in China. If you've never been in China, you're certainly not going to go there for the first time now. And if you are in China, money investment that you might have put into China over and above the need to fuel and fund your footprint there, you're now looking at that money and saying, where else could I put it? Should I put it in Vietnam or in India or in Mexico? Or I might say here in the United States, which is one of the hottest investment destinations in the world right now.
So do you believe in your consulting that you do with clients, Andy? I mean, is it right, though, for the U.S. and nations throughout Europe that have slapped trade and regulatory penalties on China, their claims that it's coercive economic market behavior, if you will, are they right to do so, especially when you've got the world's second largest economy kind of going through tough times? Like, what's the balance between that?
Yeah, look, Carol, I mean, it is in nobody's interest to drive China further inward. The country is looking inward now, right? And they feel threatened. They feel under siege. This is in nobody's interest. It's in nobody's interest now to exacerbate its economic downturn. It's in nobody's interest that China should want to build its own institutions and undermine the global US-led system. So, and they do feel that they are under siege. And look, I get it that there are internal trends in China that, are encouraging this move towards this focus, a relentless focus on national security. But one also has to understand that China is responding also to actions that the United States is taking that make it feel that the world or the United States is out to get them. So, they look at this meeting that occurred in Camp David with Japan and South Korea and the United States, and this just adds to the sense of containment. So that's not in anybody's. And there are a lot of people that are saying, look, maybe it's time for a timeout on some of this. Would it be such a bad idea to lift the tariffs on China, which after all aren't achieving any of their objectives of narrowing the trade surplus and in fact are being paid for in the end by the U.S. Consumer? And frankly, I think that this was something, some of that sentiment is exactly what Gina Raimondo was expressing in her visit to China. The United States and China does $2 billion a day of trade, and she said, look, this trade is good for China, good for the United States, and good for the world. So, let's put some of this in proportion.
Andy.
Because could I just wait?
Yeah,
real
go
quick
ahead, Carol.
Follow. If the world's second largest economy crater, we're going to feel it, right? Here in the United States?
You are, but it's not going to crater.
Okay.
I think the way to think about it is that, China is a giant, right? It is an economic giant. Its manufacturing sector is bigger than the United States and Europe combined, okay? And this year it's going to leap ahead of Japan to become the world's largest auto export. It's gobbling up the world's EV markets. It's a giant, but it's a giant with a weak heart, okay? And that's going to make it less mobile. It's going to make it more prone to crisis, but it's still a giant.
Andy, this is Secretary Raimondo's trip is coming at a time when we learned also that Vladimir Putin has agreed to visit China in his first trip since the ICC war crimes warrant was issued back in March. How should we look at China's embrace of Vladimir Putin and how that affects relations between the U.S. and China?
Yeah, this is an interesting visit. This will be his first truly international. He's been to a couple of neighboring countries in Central Asia. He went to Iran, but this is the first major international trip that he's taken since the International Criminal Court in Hague indicted him on war crime charges earlier this year. And what this is telling us is the Chinese are not giving up on Vladimir Putin. He was and remains what Xi Jinping calls my best friend, regardless of what's happening in Ukraine. And look, I was in Beijing. You mentioned the Winter Olympics at the beginning of last year, and this was where they hatched their No Limits partnership, right on the opening day of the Beijing Winter Olympics on February 4th. Games finish on February 20th. 4 days later, February 24th, the tanks and armor and troops roll across the border into Ukraine. And ever since then, China's been giving Russia diplomatic cover. in the Ukraine. The bottom line is that they can't have Putin failing in China. It would be a severe blow personally to Xi Jinping. But also the way they look at it in China is, look, if U.S. led NATO win here, we're next. All right. And so, bottom line, they cannot allow him to fail.
It's complicated, right, Andy, though?
It's super complicated because they're paying a pretty heavy price for this. We talk about business investment. European businesses looking at China now. They're reading right over from Ukraine to Taiwan and saying, we made this big bet on Russia, and look where it got us. And we making an even bigger bet on China. European governments are looking at China in a very different way. This is Putin is Europe's public enemy number one, and this is Xi Jinping's best friend. Having said that, there's quite a bit that they can salvage out of this. Number one, they're going to have a role. They'll have a role in any peace agreement, and they'll certainly have a big role, one would think, in the reconstruction of Ukraine, if and when we finally get a peace in that country.
Yeah. All right. Listen, thank you so much. So appreciate it. We know it's all been busy for everybody, but do appreciate whenever we get time with you. Andy, be well. Andy Browne, as we said before, leads the China Hub as a partner at Brunswick Group and former Bloomberg colleague, former editorial director at Bloomberg New Economy. But as we said, 3 decades in Asia, China editor, columnist for the Wall Street Journal. So his experience is on-the-ground experience and really understanding it all.
We have the data. We like to get the anecdotes from Andy, too, from his trips there.
Totally.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
So we do want to talk about the hurricane Idalia. Am I saying it right?
Idalia.
Idalia. Sounded weird in my ear. Anyway, more importantly, knocking out power to hundreds of thousands of customers, grounding more than 800 flights, unleashing floods along Florida's coast, far from where it came ashore as a Category 3 storm earlier Wednesday. So we've been all tracking it. I'm sure you all have seen it on news, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and Carol, we track how much this stuff costs very closely because there are serious economic implications for disruptions and for repairs caused by storms. We talked about it with Hawaii.
Yeah.
Estimates, too, are starting to come out about the cost of this storm. Enki Research says that it may lead to $10 billion in losses. And we know our team has already warned about FEMA running out of money following the fire in Hawaii. All
right, so let's get to it. Lee Mayfield is with us. He's Director of Response at the emergency management consulting firm Hagerty Consulting, also the former Director of Public Safety and Emergency Management for Lee County, Florida, which includes Cape Coral and Fort Myers. He joins us on the phone from Tampa. Also with us is Rob Carolyn. He's a Bloomberg News meteorologist. He joins us on the phone in New York. Rob, I do want to start with you. What's the latest on the storm and what you are seeing?
We're seeing it in the process of working its way towards the Brunswick, Georgia area, Carol. It's now causing wind gusts in the vicinity of Brunswick. It's 60 miles an hour. Douglas, Georgia, also reporting 60-mile-an-hour gusts. Moving off to the northeast at 20 miles an hour. There's a tornado watch that's in effect from the coastal areas of northeastern Georgia along the South Carolina coast and into southeastern North Carolina. That's up through 9 o'clock this evening. The worst of the weather in regards to rain is north and northeast of that center of circulation. That's west of Brunswick, Georgia. We're going to see 4 to 8 inches of rain across that area over the next 24 hours, which is going to lead to flash flooding near the core of what was the eye of the storm. That's where the highest winds are. You just mentioned the power outages. You look at the track map, you look at the power outages, they match right up from where it went inland at Keaton Beach, Florida this morning and where it is now. Over the next 6 to 12 hours, the track will change from northeast to east-northeast. So it's going to allow the storm to move across northeastern Georgia, then up through eastern South Carolina tonight. Computer models, the latest ones coming in, have the storm then exiting the U.S. coast just east of Wilmington, North Carolina, around 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So after 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, Rob, the worst of it is behind us?
the worst of it will be behind us. We'll notice that it's probably going to become a strong tropical storm overnight because the core is still inland. So what's happening is those winds of 125 miles an hour when it made landfall this morning are slowly winding down. We'll probably still see some gusts up over hurricane force strength later tonight into tomorrow morning, especially along the South and North Carolina coast. The Outer Banks will probably see those type of winds. But once it gets out into the Atlantic, all the really heavy rain that we're seeing north and northeast of the center will push out into the Atlantic, and the flash flooding issues will go away. The only remaining issues will be some winds through midday tomorrow along the coast of North Carolina and about as far south as Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Hey, one thing I want to get into, listen, we have storms, and we've had, my whole lifetime, hurricanes. We have hurricane season, and I'm not playing light to it, and there's lives at risk, and hope everyone that is in the path of this storm does okay. But what I want to get to with you, Lee, and then Rob weigh in on this as well, is in terms of what we increasingly are seeing in terms of the frequency, strength, force, and the impact and the amount of damage done by storms and how climate change plays into it. Lee, how are you thinking about it bigger broadly, and what worries you?
Sure, great question. I think it's been almost a year since Hurricane Ian last year in the Southwest Florida area, and here we are again. So I think this is part of our new reality. We seem to have had a very busy 5-year period, especially when it comes to these devastating hurricanes, and this one is no different. Idalia is an incredibly catastrophic storm, so I think really brings front and center this idea of resiliency and recovery, and what does that look like moving forward as we see more of these storms.
Well, what does resiliency look like? Does it look like actually people not living in places where they've traditionally lived, Lee?
It's a team effort. This business and emergency management and resiliency takes a lot of different players. Local jurisdictions, state, federal government, NGOs, private sector. Funding is a big component of this. So I think that's something we have to seriously look at, how we fund these larger projects as we look towards resiliency and mitigation moving forward.
Well, and Rob, come back into the conversation. In terms of the frequency and the volatility and the damage and the strength that we are seeing increasingly with the storms that impact the United States and really the world at large, but the U.S. that we've seen. I mean, look at what happened on the West Coast. A storm just doesn't happen. And there it happened just, was it a week ago or so? Should we be thinking as a nation about not building on certain areas because it's just getting tougher and tougher for people to exist there?
Well, that makes sense just from the fact that, barrier islands of the coast are temporary landforms. They're not really meant to be built on. The last time we saw a hurricane or a tropical storm hit the West Coast was September of 1939. One of the things we meteorologists are aware of in the hurricane cycle is there's a 30-year cycle with hurricanes. So the last peak ran through the 1950s into the 1970s. We had a tremendous amount of storms go up the East Coast in the 1950s. We had Hazel, Carol, Donna. They all occurred in less than 10 years. We're now in the midst of another very active cycle that should start to end in the mid-2020s. It's been running since the mid-1990s. It starts to decrease around 25 or 26. So we've got a couple more years with that. The other thing that we really have to take a look at is the oceans on this planet are getting warmer. We're in a very warm cycle. These storms exist to do one thing, move heat from the tropical regions of the world to the polar regions. That's why they move around the Bermuda High. They take that excess warmth that develops over the oceans during the summer and pushes it to the poles. They're heat engines, so they're trying to redistribute heat. The warmer the oceans are, the stronger these systems are going to be. And the other thing I've noticed, I've been doing this for a little over 30 years. In my career, the fact they are intensifying much more rapidly. From Katrina in 2005 becoming a storm of, incredible magnitude in 36 hours. It went from a Cat 1 to a Cat 5. We had the same problem several years ago with Irma and Maria. They became Category 5 hurricanes in just a few days. This storm went over waters that were 90 degrees or warmer over its 72 hours in existence. And that's how you get a storm to go from a Cat 1 to a Cat 4 overnight. It's the ocean driving this problem.
Lee, weigh in on that. Do you agree with Rob that this is the warmer oceans are doing this and it's intensified throughout your career as well?
Yeah, we've certainly seen this idea of rapid intensification. It's just really a big fear even of emergency managers. Hurricane Michael comes to mind, and this one here is no different this week. You're having to make decisions very quickly when these storms rapidly intensify, and that's something that is difficult to do from a timing perspective, and definitely a concern that we're having to deal with more in our profession.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Listen, guys, thank you so much for weighing in on all of this and giving us some perspective. So appreciate it. Lee Mayfield, Director of Response at the emergency management consulting firm Hagerty Consulting. As we said, also former Director of Public Safety and Emergency Management for Lee County, Florida. And our thanks to Rob Carolyn. He's a well-known voice when it comes to covering what's going on in the weather. A Bloomberg News meteorologist joining us, both of them on the phone, one in New York, Rob there, and of course, Lee in Tampa.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
A lot of headbanging going on in our studio. Hey, we're talking cities. Stories are already beginning to trickle out from the upcoming new Double Cities issue of Bloomberg Businessweek, out in its entirety on newsstands tomorrow, online at Bloomberg.com/Businessweek and on the Bloomberg. And Tim, we heard one of the stories from the issue yesterday. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was about the 750-acre Jericho Gate development. It's part of the fragile real estate boom emerging in Palestinian territories. We talked all about it with Bloomberg News Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Browne, also Bloomberg Businessweek editor Joel Weber, who is also back with us today.
He is indeed, along with the Businessweek technology editor Joshua Brustein and Bloomberg CityLab editor David Dudley. So let's get into the city's issue. Joel joining us from Massachusetts. Joshua is here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, and David on Zoom from our Washington, D.C. bureau. And Joel, we were kidding Tim and I earlier that we kind of know certain times of the year we look forward to the city's issue, because you just take us, I said it yesterday, you take us to parts of the world that maybe we don't talk about, but we really should be.
Yeah, and this has just been a little source of pride for us, because we've long done a cities issue, and then Bloomberg acquired CityLab, and we were like, wow, now we can really make cities issues even that much better. And obviously, Josh led the effort at the magazine. And when we started talking about this, I was like, we don't have to kill ourselves. We don't need to go big. And Josh was like, actually, I was planning to do a full issue takeover. And I have all these amazing stories. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. So he tested it. And I think, part of the framing that we wanted to look at here is, here we are a couple years after COVID, although, hey, cases still ticking back up, and cities are still in that aftermath, and we wanted to kind of look at a few of the ways that's continued to play out, and then find some of those really startling, amazing stories that I'm sure we'll spend a little bit more time talking about, including yesterday. But Josh, where were the places that when you sort of architected and you started from blank white pages in these exercises, where did you want to make sure that we got to visit?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things. For the last cities issue, actually, I had written about the idea of trying to build a new city from scratch. And so I know that there's been a lot of effort around the world to do this. And on my list of places to look at was a place called Forest City in Malaysia, which is a city that is being constructed on what will eventually be, if all goes according to plan, 4 artificial islands, have about 700,000 people on it. And the interesting thing about this city is that it was all based on the idea that the Chinese real estate market is just booming. It was being built by Country Garden, whose name you might recognize if you've been paying attention to the Chinese.
No, we never talk about it.
China real estate market booming and Country Garden are two things we talk about quite a bit, Joshua.
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
So one of the islands has been constructed. There's room for not 700,000 residents, but certainly I think in the tens of thousands. And things have kind of ground to a halt. They've ran into trouble with COVID. There's serious questions about demand. And so we sent a really talented reporter there to look around, to talk to people, and just to kind of see what is happening with one of these big audacious projects.
Yeah, that real estate element attached to China, and it just really was a timely look at a place that, I think we're all very, very curious and concerned about. So, David, I want to bring you in because CityLab was obviously totally instrumental in this. There was an idea that Josh and I were noodling, And then Josh was like, actually, I talked to David and we should do what they're doing. I was obsessed with concrete. I was like, we got to do a story about concrete. Like, so much of the world uses that as a building
Did you hear what
ingredient.
Joshua he just said? That's true. He is
That's
obsessed.
Really, Joel
I was
wants
like,
to do just a concrete
I was like,
issue.
let me tell you about concrete, Josh. But David, tell us about where we went with that initial kernel.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for playing the Foghat to get us in here. We are fools for the city here at CityLab. So we had this project going where we were similarly kind of intrigued by and sort of astonished by the amazing kind of energy intensity of concrete production, which is, something like 8-9% of all carbon released in the atmosphere every year. And it's rivaled by steel production. And in many countries, brick production, which is an even older material, is also intensely polluting. And so we had been noodling around with this idea of having a whole series about what we call the stuff of cities, which is just sort of a dive into the history and the past and the present and the future of the most essential building blocks of urban life. And we were able to sort of convert that idea into this really lovely looking kind of print and online package that looks at not only concrete and steel and brick, but also glass and asphalt and wood, sort of the oldest material of the six that is kind of coming back into vogue as a kind of economically and environmentally useful building material for all kinds of skyscrapers.
Well, David, I don't want to get Joel upset since he's really into concrete. But what is replacing concrete?
Well, that's the thing. Nothing can replace concrete. It is this miraculous artificial stone that has been a absolute kind of foundational material since Roman times. What we can do is we can devise ways of making it a little less polluting and hopefully a lot less polluting eventually. So there are techniques to fire it at lower temperatures. The firing process of making cement is intensely kind of energy absorptive. There's chemical processes that can be involved. There's adding more recycled elements. And there's also sort of being a little more flexible about how you use it and using different kinds of concrete for different applications. The concrete that the Romans used 2 millennia ago was actually sort of kind of environmentally much less destructive. So this kind of nerding out to the
Rocky
nitty-gritty
apparently
of
likes
urban life.
concrete too, huh, Joel?
Joel, is that your dog?
Yeah.
Rocky's into concrete too.
Mute that one.
It's okay. Go ahead, David. Please finish.
So what we were sort of fascinated by was how sort of the history of these materials has sort of tracked human civilization and how we are kind of simultaneously in desperate need of more of this and in desperate need of finding a way to clean up these industries. And each of these sort of industries faces their own different challenges with sort of finding the raw materials and finding ways to make it less destructive.
All right, so we talked about building materials. It's the city's double issue. So everything in it is about cities. It's a collaboration with Bloomberg CityLab. Joel Weber, there's a column in here by Joshua Green. It's about how GOP legislatures are increasingly imposing their economic and cultural priorities on left-leaning municipalities, places where perhaps a lot of New Yorkers, Californians have moved during the pandemic, Nashville, Tennessee. What's the latest dispatch from Josh?
So what's really interesting about this one was this, and this was a story that major props to Josh Brustein for collaborating initially on Josh Green on this one, with Josh Green on this one. But this tension between blue cities and red states really came to a head earlier this year, and we asked Josh to go to Nashville, where so much of this has really been culminating, and give us sort of a dispatch. Because one interesting thing about this is that blue city, red state relationship has been actually like an incredible economic arrangement that everybody's benefited from. But what we're beginning to see is that red states are kind of cracking down and asserting an authority on what had heretofore been Democratic strongholds. And that alliance is sort of, or relationship is sort of now in flux in a way that we're going to really have to be watching how this plays out, because GOP is looking for more and more ways to pick up not only like talking points that they can latch onto, but also ways that they can affect change. And targeting blue cities seems to be one of the ways that they can see immediate reactions with, which totally happened in Nashville, even though a lot of this has been pushed back on since. Mr. Brustein, what did I miss in that description?
I mean, that was a pretty good description. I think the thing that's interesting here is that, as Josh immediately found once he started calling around, was that this is actually an area where you've really seen the transformation of the two political parties play out. You know, in Washington, Congress isn't passing much, but one thing we've seen in recent years is that a lot of red state legislators have gotten a lot redder, and the makeup of the legislators in that Republican majority has gotten much different, more populist, more aggressive, especially on cultural issues, at the same time that city level legislation is tackling really hot button issues. Criminal justice has become, you know, even more of a forefront over the last couple of years. Issues around transgender rights, a lot of times cities are passing things to expand those rights, and states are looking to crack back on that. And so they have the power to do so, and it's playing out not only in Nashville, but in a lot of other places as well.
Well, and I want to bring you back in, David, because I do wonder, you guys at CityLab, what goes on in cities increasingly, I feel like coming out of the pandemic, recent political cycles, George Floyd, like the fabric of cities. Yes, it's the buildings, it's the structures, but politics is so much impacting the landscape of our nation's cities.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as Josh says, the dynamic that you see in Nashville is repeated in a lot of different states. Texas, West Coast cities, and sort of more conservative state lawmakers are tangling in Oregon, and it's a phenomenon that predates our current political era. It's not new in that sense. It's also not a phenomenon that's unique to the United States. You see variations on this in Europe, and it's a tension that has always sort of kind of been kind of woven into the landscape. The nature of urban life tends to require a certain set of policy solutions, and there is often a real kind of pushback from community members who don't see those policy solutions as reflecting their values. And that has manifested its way in all sorts of interesting and troubling ways. It really kind of got weaponized in a dramatic way, certainly in the Trump era, but it's always been sort of kind of humming beneath urban relationships for millennia probably.
Okay, I got one more thing I want to bring up, which, as much as I talked about concrete to Josh, the other thing was, look, like I want to feel like cities are working, that they have answers, that they're trying to improve people's lives, and or there are other people who have ideas to fix them. And we started with this idea of real estate a little bit, and Pat Clark did this element that we kind of turned into the first thing we had in ways to fix cities. And obviously we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems with commercial real estate and empty office space. And Pat came up, Josh, with such a novel idea rooted in a real estate listing that he saw. What was the big takeaway that we all need to get hip with?
Yeah, this was a really great insight from Pat. I mean, I started bugging Pat about doing something about converting offices into apartments early on in this. It's something that we've been talking about a lot. It's hard to say something new about it because everyone's said a lot about it. And so I kept bugging him, and eventually he said, well, I've talked to a couple people who came up with this idea, like, why are we trying to make these things nice apartments? Why don't we just make them really crappy apartments? In the same way that in Soho in the 60s, those sweatshops that they turned into lofts, those weren't nice lofts. But tastemakers moved in and they loved them. And so the idea is, like, what if we can just make, the fluorescent lighting and the gray carpeting be sort of the drafty windows and the exposed brick of the, of the Soho of today.
I love that because you're right. We spent so much time talking about it, and I just thought that take on it was incredible. So much in this issue. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. And just incredible issue, incredible cities issue. Joel Weber, editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, Joshua Brustein, technology editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, who really put this all together, along with David Dudley, editor at Bloomberg CityLab, joining us out there in DC. Guys, thank you.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 18 minutes left in today's session. And we're watching, a market where, you read through the economic news and maybe investors once again thinking, okay, maybe the Fed is getting near the end because we've got a little bit of a rally. And what the S&P 500 up, is it for a fourth day in a row?
Fourth day in a row, 45.14.
Yeah, so we're above that 4,500 mark.
Okay, so much for the August doldrums, Carol. Month to date, the S&P is only down 1.5%.
I don't call them doldrums because there's always fireworks in August. At least the last 5 years, 6 years, I don't know.
There's one more day of the month, and we could potentially be, flat for the month.
There's some drama. We did see yields back off a little bit. You heard Charlie talking the numbers. Let's see what Hank Smith has to say about this environment. He's CIO of the individual and institutional wealth management firm Haverford Trust. He joins us on the phone from Radnor, Pennsylvania. Hank, good to have you back with us. How are you, and how are you thinking about the market environment right now?
Well, it's great to be with you. Good afternoon, and I am doing very well, thank you. Look, this has been one of the most interesting years in my 38 years in this business. And there's that Wall Street adage, bull markets climb walls of worry. And that has never been more true than this year when you consider everything the market has overcome in terms of very elevated inflation at the beginning of the year, the most aggressive Fed rate hike cycle that we've experienced in 30 plus years. Also, 3 bankruptcies and the potential for another banking crisis, and concerns about commercial loan repayments, concerns about student loan repayments, and the market has just seen its way through it all. And look, we continue to remain pretty optimistic, but recognizing that we could very well, Carol, have a relatively flat rest of the year, but the broad market do pretty well. So in other words, if the so-called Magnificent Seven stall out here, which they clearly need a breather, you could also see plenty of laggards pick up the slack,
That's
yet the
interesting.
broad averages remain relatively flat.
Can I say there is a point, like if you're an investor, at least on the equity, I'm doing plain vanilla, you're looking at a NASDAQ 100 that's up 41% so far this year, and you're looking at an S&P 500 that's up 17%. Mind you, I'm just doing the bigger, broader averages. To kind of put it in the bank, take a money market or some kind of you look at what treasuries are yielding and just say, I'm good in 2023. Like you can see why people might just take a breather.
Absolutely. But look, small stocks offer tremendous opportunities. The equal weighted S&P 500 is half of what the market cap weighted S&P 500. So there's plenty of opportunities. And even in terms of valuation, the valuation of the market weighted cap S&P 500 is skewed by those handful of tech stocks that are driving the valuation higher. But if you look at the equal weight S&P valuation, it's much more reasonable.
So where are the opportunities for the stocks that haven't yet had the room to run or haven't run yet this year?
Well, I think, look, it'd be very healthy to see a broadening out of the market. And we saw a little bit of that in June. And then it was back to Magnificent Seven driving the market, after June. I think there is opportunities both in healthcare, which has been a laggard, in consumer staples, which have been a laggard, and we have pretty decent weightings in those two sectors.
Where don't you want to be? Is it just those names that have really led the big outperformers? And I hesitate too, if I can just do a kind of a second question, that every time everybody's like, stay away from the big tech that have led, and then they have another drive up. That's significant.
Right. And so this year's been a mirror opposite of last year. And who would have predicted that after sustaining those very significant corrections, the tech stocks would come roaring back. But it's hard to get excited about buying those stocks after the kinds of moves they've had. So we would caution investing in that area. And plus, it's hard. If you are trying to beat the index, you need to own more than 7% in Apple and Microsoft. And if you're a fiduciary, that's very difficult. You just don't buy that much in two stocks.
That's a really interesting point. Okay, so I guess my question is about those sort of unknown unknowns. What's out there that concerns you?
Well, look, whenever you're growing below trend line, as this economy is right now, despite what the Atlanta Fed tracker is forecasting for the third quarter, you are susceptible to external shocks. The problem is you can never identify those external shocks. And certainly back in March, with that mini crisis, banking crisis, one would have thought at that time, this is an external shock. And yet the market low, or nearly the market low for this year, was the day Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt. And you could never have then said, let's buy stocks. We're going to be up 15% from here over the next handful of months. Yet that's exactly what happened. So I think the concerns about the beginning of the repayment of student debt, it's a concern, but I don't think that's going to be a big factor that is going to affect the economy one way or the other. And people have been talking about it for months now, so that's not a big issue.
10 seconds, Hank. New money, put it in the equity market, put it in cash, put it in treasuries. If you had to pick between those three, where do you do it?
Well, look, as long as your time frame is 3 to 5 years, put it in equities.
Interesting. Okay. Are you holding cash though a lot for your clients right now? Really quickly.
No.
Okay.
Very little cash. But I can tell you the clients where we have a balance between stocks and bonds have been very, very happy with the rise in interest rates.
Interesting. All right. Good stuff. Hank Smith, thank you as always. CIO of Haverford Trust, on the phone from Radnor, Pennsylvania.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.